there's a feeling and a rawness of being very deeply human that you can only get when you're out there having this experience, that you can't fabricate that or create that in any other setting. The feeling of being human and small and alive and raw, this is your opportunity to do that. So that's one thing. Two is we as humans are capable of incredible things. And when you're living your day to day and you're thinking about your day to day challenges and hardships or joy, you can do so much more than you actually think. You just have to put yourself to the test.
Hello, intrepid listeners, and welcome to the Carpe Diem Live Your Dream podcast. I'm your host, Dale Simonson, and my guest today is Kate Coward, an impressive middle-aged working mother who happens to be an amazingly accomplished winter expedition racer. I was drawn to Kate's story for the incredible grit she demonstrates out in the depth of winter, and for the way she describes translating the physical and mental challenges she experiences on the trail into improving her day-to-day life. Oh, and I'm also just hugely intrigued by two of the races she frequents, the Arrowhead 135 in northern Minnesota and the race in Alaska where she traces the Iditarod dog sled trail in the dead of winter on a bike. You're sure to be inspired and learn a lot from this one. Enjoy the show. Hello, Kate, and welcome to the podcast. I'm so glad you could join me today. How are you?
Hi, Dale. I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, well, listen, you come really highly recommended from a very good acquaintance of mine who I respect. And so I am really excited because I've heard you've done a couple of really neat outdoor events that I'm rather intrigued with. But before we get into any of your adventures, tell us just a little bit about yourself, just your general background.
Yeah, well, let's see. I was born and raised in Minnesota. I I'm a mom. I've now probably spent most of my life in Minnesota, but there was a point where it was about 50-50 because I left as a teenager and lived in Europe and Asia and West Coast, East Coast, all over the place, and found my way back to Minnesota about 15 years ago. And I've always been interested in moving my body and sweating, and whether it was playing actual sports or just running around the house, playing in the woods, and also just had this hunger or desire to see things in the world. So my family didn't travel globally when I was young. I mean, we would drive everywhere for fun road trips, but they still sort of talked about the world as my oyster, and in the sense that I grew up thinking I could go anywhere and do anything. And so there was a lot of dreaming until I could make that a reality in my adulthood. And here I am, kind of middle aged at this point. And I've got a career that I love, and it's very keeps me very, very busy, and a kindergartner who also keeps me busy. Yeah, and then I like to do some extreme-ish adventures. They're feeling less extreme these days, so I'm trying to figure out what's next so that I start to get that fear again.
They're feeling less extreme. Is that because yeah, is that because you've desensitized to them?
I think so. Yeah, I
Uh-oh.
mean it's always fun. It's always fun and it's always hard. So that does not change, but I think I need a little bit more of that fear or discomfort that
Ah.
is harder to find when I'm doing some of like the same races or the same adventures. And so I'm in a transition time, just trying to figure out what does that look like. And I have to do more planning. Like some of these adventures that I tend to go back to and do, I can rinse and repeat a little bit, and I don't have a lot of time to research and plan and do a lot of things. So it works well for me in that way, but there is a little something missing that I need to figure out.
Let's talk about the what I think are some pretty impressive adventure races you have done. Pretty cool ones. I'll rattle off a few. You might have done others. Arrowhead 135, the Iditarod Trail Invitational 350, Unbound
Mhm.
200. I think a lot of our listeners don't know what any of these are. Can you just highlight a few of them, give a little overview of what they are and what sort of races you tend to do?
Yeah, I'd say I spent a good part of my adult life, 15 or 20 years worth, doing marathons and Ironman triathlons, sort of in the daylight type races, let's say. And then, but now I would categorize what I tend to do into two categories. One is winter ultras. So that can be, think of it as typically anything that is more than 15 or 24 hours on snow, often in extreme cold
It sounds
conditions.
like sounds like a Minnesotan, Kate. I'm from
Yes, of
Minnesota. It
course.
sounds
That's
like,
what,
yeah.
yeah, that's what we do.
Yeah, exactly.
And those can be, they're all human powered. So whether it's fat biking or on foot or skis, that's what that world looks like. And then the other one is gravel racing. So yeah, my first gravel race was the Day Across Minnesota, which is a 240-mile race from South Dakota to Wisconsin in August. Starts at midnight on a Friday night. And then I've done the Unbound, which is now part of the Lifetime Grand Prix series. That's how I would categorize what I have been up to in the last few years.
I think you had mentioned somewhere you got into these things, quote, later
hmm
in life. What does that mean?
I would say, yeah, I mean, I was in my, let's see, mid to late 30s when I did my first Arrowhead in 2016. And then gravel racing didn't happen until my 40s. So these are sports, let's say, that actually tend not to have a lot of young people in their early 20s doing them, probably in part because there's a dollar commitment, meaning like it does cost money to do things. And so, if anyone else is out there like me, graduating from college, I was drinking whatever free coffee I could find and scraping together every penny
Yeah.
possible. So, like, an expensive bike or a flight to go do a race. Wasn't in the cards at that time. And then also it takes, I think, years just to build experience. Even when starting it later, you learn year after year. You meet people, you learn from them, you build a base, which you just keep adding to that base over time. So just the physical access to doing these things I think becomes a little bit easier as you age in a sort of a twisted way. I'm sure there's like the other side of the hill at some point here, but and it's not these are and the winter ultra events too. These aren't things that people really know exist. I mean, I still go out there with my fat bike and people say things like, "Wow, those are some pretty big tires you got on there. Do you ride on snow with that?" Those are not people who know what the Air 135 is or follow us. So it's
Right, right.
so I think also there's probably just a little bit of people find these things because they're learning about them through getting, there's like the entry point, and then after you enter into the world and you start expanding knowledge and it proliferates, you meet the people and then you learn about the events that exist out there.
I want to hear more about this Arrowhead 135. So I've seen a YouTube video and read a little bit about it, never talked to anybody who's done it. You've done it multiple times. Explain first what that race is, and then let's talk about a couple of your entrance
Absolutely.
to it.
So the Arrowhead 135 is a 135-mile race in the coldest week of the year in the coldest place. I don't know. Some people might say on Earth or in the northern hemisphere. It's very cold, but it starts in International Falls with the ice box of the
It's
nation. It's
just
cold up
cold.
there. Starts on the last Monday of January, which tends to be the coldest week or two of the year. And it goes through on the Arrowhead, the David Dill Arrowhead State Trail, which is a snowmobile trail through the Kabetogama Forest and ends in Tower, Minnesota at the Fortune Bay Casino. And you have, I think, 60 hours to finish the race. It starts at 7 a.m. on that Monday, and you can go on skis or bike or foot or kick sled. And there's a field entry limit, so it tends, I think the limit is like 150 people or so, and you can change your mode of transportation the morning of. So you just declare before 7 a.m. I have
Hmm.
done that. I did go out one year and check the conditions and decide to ski instead of bike at 3 a.m.
Hmm.
And I think the race is 20 years old now or so. I might have that a little off, but roughly 20 years old. And I found it about 10 years ago, heard about it, and thought it was crazy. Didn't own a fat bike or hadn't really done anything that extreme in the wintertime at that point in time, but bought a bike, and a month later was having my first experience at Arrowhead. Yeah, that was my first race, and I finished it. And then since then have done, so I've finished the course 11 times, nine in the race.
Oh,
So
wow.
nine race starts, nine finishes, and then two traverses on that course without outside of the race. One was a round trip, and the other was just during COVID. I went out and did it on my own.
You just had that itch. So 11 times tells me, Kate, that despite the sound of, okay, the coldest week in the coldest part of the country or the continent, 135 miles, 60 hour, but you still keep
Yeah.
going back. So tell me why.
Well, one of the reasons is the community. It's a cool community. These are people that you see once a year. They come from all over the world. You don't have the opportunity to socialize, or maybe you even really don't have that much in common. They aren't. Some of us wouldn't necessarily cross paths or have a connection in life, but we come together because we have this respect for the trail and wilderness, and we don't see each other as crazy. We're all normalized, and we're coming out here to do this thing together, and that's really powerful. It's always really fun to see people and what they're up to and how they've been, and to share stories of the trail or memories of events that happened to each other with each other that you're just reminiscing about. And then the other is that it's really accessible. So it's a 5 hour drive up to International Falls. It's a
Right.
way to get that adventure without something too extreme, like when you go out to Alaska. It's just harder. You have to have your bike, and then I mean, I didn't get my bike back
Yeah.
until a month after I finished Iditarod this year. And now there's just this like a buildup of memories for me. So it's almost like this
Yeah.
reunion with myself too.
Of that whole explanation, my favorite part was we don't think of ourselves as crazy. We're all kind of
Yes.
normalized. And I can see, a lot of our listeners probably think stuff like that is crazy, but I get it. Those kinds of outdoor ultras are just, I mean, you can find some serious inner peace out there.
Absolutely. And this is the thing that I suppose I would add this in of the why do I keep going back? And that is there's this feeling that you can't replicate with a drug or a condition in a bubble in your home, on the street, or anywhere other than being out in a remote area where you have no cell service, risk of death or injury is high, and you're alone with your thoughts, and you're doing something extreme. There's something very cozy about it. There's something almost inhuman, because or deeply human, because it's this experience and this feeling that you just normally don't get when you're thinking about, like, oh, what's my schedule today? I've got to get to work at this time. I have to go pick up groceries. I'm going to go get an exercise in. I have to pay the bill. You're out there, and it's so raw, and you are forced to get in tune with the deepest parts of your body and your soul, and that's your only opportunity to do that and feel that way, and that's very addicting. I love tapping into that, and I know others who feel that way, like they just can't wait to get out there and get on trail because the rest of the world turns off.
Yeah, that's right.
It's
It
silent.
just strips away all the noise of society, of day-to-day life, and just brings it down to the fundamentals.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
sometimes that's right. It's like, do I need to eat? Do I need to sleep? Do I need water? Am I cold? Am I hot? A
Yeah.
really basic feeling of survival, but then also you have moments where you're thinking about your life and it can be more clear. You have clarity because your mind wanders into those spaces and you don't have all the distractions. You have like a whole day or a whole 3 days. And so there's a little bit of self-discovery that
Yeah.
comes from those experiences too, that doesn't happen in the 45 minutes with your therapist, or reading a book, or journaling. That it's just different. It is just a different experience, and that is really special.
I would add too that it just gives some great personal gratification when you accomplish something like that that you think maybe you couldn't accomplish it, and then you realize you could, and it makes you go out into life realizing there's so much that you might not think you can do, but you actually can. And I think it makes you better in day-to-day life, just taking on challenges and dealing with difficulties like that.
Absolutely. I've learned so much out on trail that I've been able to bring back to my personal life. I still remember, I think the biggest thing was my first Arrowhead, a lesson that I will never forget, and has been the one that has applied, or I've brought back to my work life, my personal life more than anything else. Was there was another racer who had done many ultras and was very experienced, and we were hike biking because it was such a warm year, and I hadn't considered that. So I was kind of being negative about it. Like, I mean, I was saying things like, well, I came here to bike, not walk. And not realizing at the time that, by the way, in winter ultras, if you're on a bike, you're going to be walking a lot. Sometimes it could be the majority of the race or half the race. Like, that is winter ultra. It's like, if you
Hmm.
can bike a lot, that's amazing. I mean, so, but I didn't realize that at the time, and I was a little sour on that. And this gentleman from Winnipeg said, You've got to," he gave me some advice. He just said, "You've got to change your mindset about this. Like, if you start thinking about the finish, or you get negative, you're just going to spiral, and it's going to make this a miserable experience. Just like, you've got 3 days and you're probably going to finish in one. Just like, accept it, and you've got to work on that head of yours." And I will never forget it, because now that has been my superpower, both on the trail and then also in life. And not always good. I mean, I just got feedback from someone on my team who said, "You have this way of compartmentalizing. When things get really, really hard, you just like charge through it. You compartmentalize and you move ahead. And like, I learn a lot from you, but you have to remember that not everybody can do that or is like that. So it benefits me when there's sort of insurmountable amount of stress or work or chaos, but it is something I need to figure out how to keep in check, because I can't assume that everybody else can do that, or they're in alignment with that. But it has helped when things are really hard. Just sometimes it helps to smile, or to think positive thoughts. That can make a lot of things different. That doesn't mean I do it all the time. I mean, I definitely struggle with it, but it is pretty, your mind is really powerful. And that's another thing on the trail, is you can't think of the finish. If you start to anticipate the finish, every minute is going to be slower and slower and slower. So you have to divide it up into chunks, whatever that is.
Yeah.
Like, whether it's you're just putting one foot in front of another, and you're not worried about the time or where you are, you're just being very, very present. Or whether it's, okay, I'm going to go until I finish singing these 3 songs, or I count to 1,000, or whatever the thing is. And then you assess and you do the next little goal for yourself.
When you do that, time really like takes on a whole different pace. Like it's
Yeah,
uncanny how time is so relative in those
very much
situations.
so. Yeah.
Kate, tell me more about the 135. So you've done it 11 times. You've done it hiking, skiing, and biking. Is that right?
Yes. So one ski, and then two by foot. So one year, my friend Kari Gibbons and I started at the finish and went to the start on foot. And then we started the race on foot and finished the race. So it was a double,
Okay.
270 miles in a row. And then the rest have all been on bike.
Okay. Tell us a little bit the difference between those three modes on a trail race like that in the snow, and why you like one over another, why you've
Sure.
typically done biking.
Yeah, it really depends on the conditions, how different, because they can be wildly different. The biking for me is the easiest in terms of the toll on my body. So I do regularly bike, but also the biking doesn't take 60 hours. And so it's just an easy go-to for me. So just given I'm not doing a lot of training these days, so it's easier just to pick that up and get out there. With the foot, though, that you can't just show up cold. And even the year I did it, I did not. A lot of the people who are doing the foot division are regularly doing ultras year round. They're doing backyards or they're doing hundreds, other big races, and I I don't, and so it's just harder, and there's so much more time required to train on foot because you need time on feet. That's the biggest thing, and I just don't have the time. I'm getting like 15 to 45 minutes on the trainer in these days, and so the bike is just much easier. And then with skis, I've
Okay.
done, I don't know, 6, 7, or 8 Berkeys, and that was I just know how to. I didn't like ski and train for it, but I know how to. And it was one of those years where I could throw on my skate skis, and it was pretty warm and fast. If it had been a cold year, it would have been more like hiking on the skis because the skis just don't run when it's really cold.
Yeah.
So I skate skied and just made my way through it. So they're very different, but you still have all the same challenges and frustrations and joy with all three. With I guess with foot you're out there longer, so you have to sleep at some point. But with bike, I can go overnight. I don't have to sleep.
Yeah, if I were to do it, which I am intrigued, I would most likely do it by foot, so I don't have to go out and buy a fat bike,
Hmm.
and I don't have skis. And it seems like foot would be the cheapest to equip myself
Hmm.
with, and maybe just the most, I don't know, basic. So tell me a little bit, like the good and the bad of doing it by foot. How long does it typically take people? Do they pack a pack or a sled, or
Yeah.
how do you do that?
Yeah, so typically the foot division are pulling a sled, and I would say the majority are pulling a sled with ropes, maybe even a little bungee, so not like a hard pulk. I've used a hard pulk with skiing. There are benefits to that, but for the most part, on the Arrowhead, I would say something that's very generous where it can move around because you want to be able to like hop on your sled and actually sled down a hill. You want to be able to access things in your sled easily instead of unclipping the
Mm,
harness. So a
mm-hmm,
soft
mm-hmm,
rope with I did like half a bungee works. There are like, for example, I'm trying to think if anyone has brought a backpack. I think I've seen people who do it unsupported, which is another category that I've also done on bike. But if you're doing it on foot and unsupported, that means that you cannot receive any support or go indoors from the start line to the finish line. So I've seen
mm-hmm.
people maybe carry a pack also just to get more. It's not terribly big because you can fit a bit on your sled, but to get more supplies. But yeah, it's typically a sled. The most like accessible, cheap version is the Paris orange sled. I think it's like 35 or $45. And then you could also go up to a Northern Sledworks sled, which anyone listening who knows, don't kill me, but I think it's over a couple $100 for one of those. And then people have all different setups. Like every person has a different setup, so you'll see, like, for example, if people intend to sleep out on the trail a couple of times, which you don't need to in Arrowhead because if you can make it to Mel George's, which is the halfway point, there is a cabin that you can go into and sleep in a bunk for a little bit. But typically, if people are using their sleep systems, they might pack their thermal pad inside their bivy and then put their sleeping bag inside there and then have like snacks inside their sleeping bag so that when it's time to rest, you just pull it out and it's all ready to go.
Mm-hmm.
And then you want to think about what you're going to need more regularly or for an emergency, making sure that where that is on your sled is somewhere very accessible. So if it's here are the snacks I need for today or for the next few hours, those are either going to be on your body or on the top of your sled at the front so that you can grab it quickly. You're also going to want something like your puffy ready to go. So like I on my sled or on my bike, I tend to have my puffy even just bungeed on top so that it's really fast, especially when the conditions are there are some races I won't even use the puffy at all because it's just not cold enough. But if you're getting to like -30, -50, if you're not wearing the puffy regularly, at some point you will, and it's just nicer. Like if that's the first thing you need to do is stay warm. You don't want to get cold. So
Yeah.
having that really accessible is something else to think about on the sled.
Is it not the case with a race like it seems like that distance is right on the verge of being able to maybe travel fast and light, not do a sled,
Yeah.
not plan on sleeping. Do people just go straight through on foot?
On foot, I would imagine someone probably can. I think it's the second night. So for me, whatever the mode doesn't really matter. That first night is pretty easy. The second night, though, is when things start to get harder. And
That's when the
so,
hallucinations start.
yes, yes, I mean, I just did the Iditarod this year in Alaska, and that second night, between like 12 or 1 and 6 in the morning, I was on the biggest struggle bus. I was just unable to keep myself together, and I had at that point for that final it was the final stretch, the last 60 miles or so. I had teamed up with a couple of guys and left with them, and yeah, they were like, drink this, eat this. They were giving me like coffee, chocolate covered coffee beans and some really nasty hot caffeine water. They had been able to sleep. Like I can't sleep. I'm not a sleeper in my everyday life. I can't nap. And I
Mm.
absolutely can't sleep out there unless even when I'm like falling asleep on the bike or walking, if I lie down and try, I won't be able to. It's really hard for me. So it's a
Oh,
superpower on the shorter formats, shorter meaning like less than
yeah.
3 days. But when you get
Yeah.
longer than that, it catches up with me and I have a lot of struggles. But yeah, the hallucinations, a lot of common hallucinations out there. I would say on that second night, people report like it's very funny the stories because they're very similar. It's like you see cabins or parking lots and it's snow and trees, or you see a like an industrial building in the woods, but it's really just like the clouds and the landscape.
Yeah.
Or I've seen little gnomes, like little gremlins, kind of hiding behind trees and staring at me as I walk by.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah. Yeah. The brain does weird things
it's
at that kind of 36-hour mark.
Yes, yeah, and you can't. That's it. That's the other thing is most people will never experience that. So it's not really it's fun, but it's not because you're hurting, right? Your body's like, just
I
yeah.
saw things that, and this was on the Swanee River paddling, but I saw things at night, that second night, that I could have sworn were real. And I went back later to Google Earth and I was looking to see if these grand mansions I saw were there and if
Yes.
the house shaped
Yep.
like the Battlestar
Yep.
Galactica spaceship was really there. And only after looking at Google Earth did I convince myself that I guess those were hallucinations.
I This is resonating a lot with me. Just a couple of months ago, I thought there was maybe 10 cute little cabins on this embankment on the side of the river in the middle of nowhere, Alaska. And as I finally got
Hmm.
up close to them, I realized that it was just snow. It really wasn't anything. I have the funniest thing though. That this is very it's not really embarrassing, but it's very I find it hilarious just to tell you like what shape I was in. My first real foot ultra was the Tuscobia 160. That was before I did the Arrowhead, the double Arrowhead, and I distinctly remember it was very cold, so it was -30. So you could see my breath, and I have a really high perspiration rate, so you can like when photographers take pictures of me, there's like a cloud of breath around me. And I remember all of a sudden swatting at what I thought were ghosts and screaming. And it was just my breath.
Oh, and that's when the nice men in white coats pull you off the trail.
Yes. Yes. Yep.
Tell me a little bit about the Iditarod Trail Invitational 350. That's a route again, is it like the Arrowhead? You can bike, ski, or walk it, and
Mhm.
it follows the Iditarod dog sled route. Is that correct?
Loosely, yeah. So the Iditarod Trail Invitational, there's actually like a one was it 150 race this year. It might have been the first year they've had that. I'm not sure. And then there's a 350 and there's 1,000. And the format is very different than Arrowhead. There really aren't any rules. So with Arrowhead, there's a gear list, and you have to have every single item on the gear at the start and every single item on that gear list at the finish. And they will check you at the finish, especially if you win. They'll make you take apart everything and show them every little thing that you brought. With Iditarod, there are no gear requirements. There's also not technically a route that you need to file versus with Arrowhead, you do have to follow the route. So with Iditarod, you don't technically have to follow a route. Now, sometimes there really only is one option for everybody, but other times there are multiple options. So it starts in Nick Lake, which is just south of Wasilla, outside of Anchorage, and starts at like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And the first 70 miles, I would say, there's like hundreds of different ways people can go because there's all
Hmm.
kinds of snowmobile trails, there are cargo lanes, there's just unlimited number of ways to get to that second checkpoint. It's very funny if you go, you can rewatch on track leaders the race, and
Hmm.
this will give you a good idea of that experience because what you'll find is you see these people, it's like just spaghetti, like they all split off and everyone's going in these different directions. And you're lucky if you find like a local, an Alaskan or an Anchorage local, they've already gone and scouted out what is the best way to go to get to the river in order to get to that second checkpoint. But otherwise, the only rule is you have to check in at that checkpoint.
And you did that one. You did the 350 on bike.
Yes, yeah, 2020 I did it on bike, and then 2021 also, but I had a health event on Rainy Pass and had to leave, and then I did it on bike again this season.
So
Mhm.
describe, like, I don't know how long it took you to do the 350 miles, but describe kind of the day in the life of that race
Oh,
for you.
yeah, I mean, so I've had three experiences out there, and all three could not have been more different. In 2020, I finished in about 5.5 days, and I probably walked over 100 miles. And I'm talking walking like up to my knees or my waist in snow, and you're hauling this bike with you. There had been so much fresh snowfall back in 2020 that even on the snowmobile, if any of the trail was broken to ride on a snowmobile track, it was so soft. It was oftentimes unrideable. So that was, and then there were maybe a couple of days where the wind, like it's very typical for there to be wind so strong that it's almost tornado-like up there. But I had a day or two of basically whiteout. Like I couldn't see anything, and the wind was so strong at times I was holding my bike with my head down, trying to charge forward and not get blown over. And I'd also lost my GPS tracker at mile 100. So I was really going blind. Like I went a whole night in a windstorm, and I had a tracker, meaning people were watching me. And so I figured, well, I don't know. I might be like going off into the Yukon or like the North Pole for all I know, but someone will come get me at some point, I guess. So
Oh
that was
my.
just a,
Well,
yeah.
how are you navigating then? Is it just by compass?
Well, luckily I had heard somebody say that the historic trail was marked. And so like every mile or so, there's a like a medallion on a tree that can catch the light. So I just kept putting my head, like moving my head and looking for something to
Hmm.
catch. And I got really, really lucky because that ended up working for one night. And then there was
Wow.
another
Yeah.
section where there were only three bike, at some points there were only three male bikers ahead of me. And but there was so much wind, it was wiping out their tracks. So I would sometimes like catch a track and then maybe catch a reflective markers, and I just got really lucky. I mean, and I have a weird, an oddly incredible sense of direction. Like I just was born with a map of the world in my head. It's strange, but it has served me pretty well. And so I was able to navigate. And then once you get through a certain part of the race, there's less options. So I think I got really lucky because I did go over this rainy pass in a storm in the middle of the night, and not knowing, like, the next year I went back and it was in the daytime and there was no wind and it was sunny and I was getting lost using my tracker. Like it's almost like I need my instinct more than a map. Like and that's just, that tends to be the way it is for me in my day-to-day life too. I'm more instinctual than I am following a plan.
It's kind of nice to have a GPS backup just in case, though,
Oh, for
isn't it?
sure. I mean, this year, I'll juxtapose that to this year or contrast it with this year's experience. So that was 5.5 days. Every muscle in my body hurt. I wanted to cry every minute. And I just told myself, don't, and this is the power, right? I'd be like, just don't cry until you finish. You've got to stay strong. Every time a negative thought came into my head, I would just like swat it out of the way. And that was probably one of the hardest, if not the hardest experiences of my life, because that was 4 or 5 days of just having to stay really, really mentally and physically, but more mentally strong. And then there was a lot of fear, not knowing where I was going, what I was doing, and then just and there was extreme weather. I got frostbite on my thumb. It turned black. Like I was tired. All
Oh.
the things. It was just really hard, but it was, of course, when I was done, I was very elated. But then this year, this year was wild. This year there was very little snow. It was a decent part of the race was either bare bone, like just dirt, or hard ice. It had like melted snow or maybe even
Hmm.
sleet or rain and really hard. So I finished in less than 3 days, and Lael Wilcox and I are now. She finished a little bit before me. We're now 2 of 4 women who've ever finished in fewer than 3 days, really because of the conditions, just to give you a sense of the conditions. So we were riding our bikes like the whole time. I think I would push my bike up some hills, or there were these tussocks that would go on for miles that are absolutely impossible to ride. Very frustrating, but it was the most idyllic conditions. I couldn't you can't this I just feel like this will never happen again. It was moderate temperature, so it was cold but not too cold. I think the lowest it dropped was -12, which by our standards is like nothing. And it was sunny. There was no wind. That was insane. There's typically a ton of wind. Everything about it could not have been more complete opposite from my prior experience.
Well, Kate, we talked a little bit at the beginning about why you do these and what you get out of it, but I think to our listeners, a lot of what you've just described actually just sounds perfectly miserable.
It is.
Yet you keep going back. So, what would you say to our listeners to convince them to give something like this a try? And maybe it's not diving right in from zero to the ITI 350 or the Arrowhead 135, but to start small and give these things a chance. Why should they do that? What's the inspiration that you would give them to try it?
I'm still searching for a concise way to answer this, and maybe even my own truth that I haven't quite dialed in yet. But what I will say is, if we go back to some of the themes that I brought up, which are, there's a feeling and a rawness of being very deeply human that you can only get when you're out there having this experience, that you can't fabricate that or create that in any other setting. The feeling of being human and small and alive and raw, this is your opportunity to do that. So that's one thing. Two is, we as humans are capable of incredible things. And when you're living your day to day and you're thinking about your day to day challenges and hardships or joy, you can do so much more than you actually think. You just have to put yourself to the test. Really, we're all born the same for the most part. Like people always say like, "Oh, you're so talented." To me, I'm like, I have the same body that you have. I just have put in the work and I have the desire and I want to do these things, but like we are capable of the same things. We are both capable, and a lot of it is the mind, the ability to, the chance or the opportunity to have this time out there to fully control your body and your mind is really powerful. I mean, you can learn a lot about yourself. It doesn't mean that it's fun, but like life isn't fun every day either. So, in a way, you have this opportunity to train yourself to develop tools or skills to get through moments for some bigger reward. Like I like to tell people on my team at work that you only learn through great challenge. Like the learning
Yeah.
comes from facing adversity or challenge or something, a hardship. So this is the same thing. You're learning, and it's not just you're learning like how to bike or how to pull a sled. That's not it. You're tapping into clarity in the rest of your life, and also teaching your brain and your body. You're normalizing things in a different way that might make other things in your life easier, if because you might build a trust with yourself, like this is hard now, but if I wait it out it will be over, or this is hard but I'll learn something from it and then the next thing will be easier, or I'll grow from this
Yeah.
situation. So I think those are a couple of things. And then honestly, every time I'm out there, I have moments or hours or maybe a day where I'm like, this is so dumb. I hate this. I want this to be over. This is the dumbest. I never want to do this again. And then the minute you finish, you just have this huge sense of accomplishment, and it's like childbirth. You're like, that was horrible, but
Yeah.
I want to do it again. Like,
Yeah.
so.
It's an activity with some really low lows, but some really high highs. Like when you catch a beautiful sunset on a mountain range with nobody around and snow, just you get the highs and the lows, which I would say is a more enjoyable way to live than just a flat metal.
100%. I mean, especially Arrowhead's a little bit different, but out in Alaska, this time
Mm,
around, because of the weather, I had the opportunity to pause and soak it in many times. And that's exact. I mean, several times, like when I was going over Rainy Pass, I got to go in the daylight with this beautiful sunset, and I remember just standing there, and I was just in awe. Like I can't believe I get to
mm,
be here, and the only way I could be here is either paying somebody to snowmobile me out here, or I got here on my own. I feel so thankful that I have the means and the health. There is a lot of wonder in those experiences, along with the depths of despair. And I mean, that's me. That's how I live. I have high highs, low lows anyway, every day. So maybe Dale, you've hit on, there might be some other attraction that I'm not quite understanding
yeah,
that I need to feel from having these extremes as well.
yeah. I'm going to ask you one more question, and then my last question. What would be your two or three pieces of advice to me or anyone who wanted to give a crack at the Arrowhead 135?
Well, first, I would say you have to have a qualifying race. So I would just go out there and try something and just give it a shot. There's this race, St. Croix 40, in January that it's set up like a training, an introductory race. So it's only 40 miles. It's overnight. There's required gear and there's a couple of skills tests. It's a really great entry point. I would also say that you don't need to go out and buy a bunch of stuff. Hook up into an online community. There's one called the Wild Winter Women. For anyone who identifies as a woman is welcome to join that, and it's just a safe place to get advice or give advice or share. Then there's the Arrowhead Dream Team Facebook group, which has gotten huge and there's years of content in there with advice and things. But between those two groups, there are a bunch of us that have like three or four of everything. So I've loaned lots of gear out to people, and that can be scary because, especially like when you have to get that first set of the required gear or the survival gear, like it can be pretty pricey, but you don't have to go buy
Mm.
new. There are ways to either borrow or buy secondhand. And so I would tap into our communities. And then thirdly, I would say, look, it's not as scary as it seems. I know like the first time might feel really scary, but it's not. Like no one's died. And the required gear in Arrowhead is for safety. So you're going out there with everything that you should need in order to survive for a couple of days. And they've got great snowmobile sweeping teams that come through and check on folks. And now there's a requirement to wear a tracker with track leaders. So it's just a spot tracker that you can rent. So if someone's not moving for a while, they'll come get you. And also there are other people out there you can team up with. But I just highly encourage people to just give it a shot. You know, we have fear in things that we are unfamiliar with. And even I think of my first Arrowhead, how, I didn't sleep for like a month beforehand. I was so obsessed. And now it's like the night before, I'm like, shoot, I forgot to pack the thing. I'm just kind of throwing it all in the bag. But you're capable of quite a bit. You just have to do a little bit of homework. And if you don't like it, you don't like it. Who cares? But I think people think like, oh, I wouldn't like that at all. Yeah, give it a shot.
So my last question to all my guests, what's your next dream adventure or goal that gets you revved up?
I'm trying to figure that out. So I've been thinking more about having more adventures. So not necessarily racing, because I do really like to race. I like to race and win things, but I also like not having the anxiety of the and the pressure of that style of adventuring. So I'm trying to figure that out. There are so many places around the world that I haven't seen yet or that I'd like to have some adventure in. So I have some planning to do. I'm just so busy. It's hard to plan, but my kid is 6 and he just rode 32 miles out to grandma and grandpa's house and back. So
That's
I
impressive.
know
That's impressive.
I, he did a really great job. I definitely did a lot of encouraging.
Wow.
He's me, so I kind of know how to press his buttons, and I very much left it up to him. He did that all on his own, but I certainly was doing some encouraging of what a huge accomplishment that would be if he did it, and he took it like a champ. So my hope, I mean, I talked to him about these things, crossing my fingers that when he says he wants to do them, but who knows? But my hope is that there's something we can plan together that is fun and hard for
Oh, that
both
would
of
be neat.
us. So we'll see where that goes, but I hope he could do some with me. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to have to keep in touch then, Kate, to figure out what it is you do eventually plan because I'm going to guess it'll be something pretty cool. Well, thank you so much for today. Fascinating. And I may be reaching out to you regarding the Arrowhead 135 someday.
Thanks, Dale. Absolutely. Yeah, I'm happy to help you out or give you any advice.
Okay. Well, have a great afternoon.
Thanks, Dale. It was great to meet you.
Thanks for listening to the Carpe Diem Live Your Dream podcast. If you like the show, there's nothing more valuable to me than you following it and sharing it with others. I drop a new episode every Friday, so tune in again for another great adventure story. And check out the accompanying website, www.gocarpediemnow.com, and then go seize the day and live your dream.